Approximately 1 in 5 people suffer from an autoimmune disease. An autoimmune disease is a condition arising from an abnormal immune response to a normal body part. There are at least 80 types of autoimmune diseases. The cause is generally unknown. Some autoimmune diseases, such as lupus, run in families, and certain cases may be triggered by infection or environmental factors. Some common diseases that are generally considered autoimmune include celiac disease, diabetes type 1, Graves' disease, inflammatory bowel disease, multiple sclerosis, psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and Hashimoto's. We recognize that you need some help if you are suffering from one of these autoimmune diseases. That is why we have created our therapeutic autoimmune program. The program is a 13-week program in which you'll have weekly check-in calls with your very own nutrition coach. Your nutrition coach will help you out with all things nutrition and lifestyle to help you better your symptoms. If you are suffering from an autoimmune disease, you do not have to do it alone. The team at The Chief Life are here to support you 100% of the way. You can find out more about the therapeutic autoimmune program on our website, www.thechieflife.com, and look underneath the nutrition tab. Guys, what is up? I just wanted to quickly let you know that we are now running free nutrition consults at www.thechieflife.com. You can book in for a quick 15-minute consult where we get to talk about all things nutrition, all things lifestyle with one of our fantastic nutrition coaches. So if that is something that you feel you are in need of, please jump across to www.thechieflife.com. Can't wait to see you guys booking in. Welcome to the Chief Life Podcast,
where we deliver guests and knowledge from around the world right to your ears.
Focusing on nutrition, exercise, health, and wellness.
So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Guys, welcome back to the Chief Life Podcast. I am Matthias Turner, and today I have Scott Nelson with me from JOOVV. Now, Scotty, I am very excited for this. JOOVV is a light therapy company, and light therapy is something that I've definitely delved down the rabbit hole of a little bit more in the last few years, and kind of insight around your infrared, but also using things like your human charger and trying to utilize light and getting out in sunlight a lot more. And it's definitely something that I guess we've tried to educate a little bit more on is light in general, and how fake lights can be, they can have a negative effect, but also in regards to like an infrared light, how much they can be a positive effect on the body. So what I'd really like to know, Scotty, is firstly, like, who are you, mate? And what is JOOVV exactly?
Yeah. Well, thanks for the introduction. This should be a fun conversation, especially if you've already like semi touched on light and really the benefits or potentially negative consequences of too much artificial light. Mm-hmm. I think your audience will enjoy like a little bit of a deeper dive on this subject matter, because it's one of those underappreciated aspects to the overall health equation, or at least that's what we believe anyway here at JOOVV. But to answer your question, we make red and near infrared light therapy devices here at JOOVV. We're one of the companies that sort of pioneered this concept of full body light therapy, primarily designed for in-home use, although we do have a lot of practitioners in commercial settings and professional sports teams that are now using our devices, but they're kind of first and foremost designed for in-home use, because that's where we believe light therapy is probably best used on a consistent basis anyway. But yeah, that's who we are, at least at a high level. But I've in terms of like a little background on me, I've spent the better part of my professional career, 15 plus years in the traditional medical device space. In fact, we were chatting a little bit beforehand, before we hit the record button, that we started the company in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and that's sort of like the Silicon Valley of the medical device space. So that's the world I came from, which is there's a little bit of overlap with what we're doing at JOOVV, because it is technically a medical device, but we serve a much different audience than the practitioners and consumers that I worked with in my days in that world.
Yeah, typically, I mean, that's great. And I mean, typically speaking, like red lights before something like JOOVV have been found in things such as like beauty therapy rooms. They'll put a heat lamp on you, or like a acupuncture room as well, but then going into things like your saunas. So it's kind of cool that you guys have taken the thing that's most effective and made it into a smaller functional device. I think that's really a great concept.
Yeah, and if for anyone that's listening to this and has heard of light therapy or LED therapy, most of the time, at least from our perspective, is they've used it at a spa, right? At a med spa or with an esthetician or some sort of skincare professional that's used it primarily for the skin related benefits. But that was one of the things, quite honestly, that we observed early on before we technically started the company, is that most of the products available at the time were kind of being marketed and promoted primarily just for skin health, and that's why they were kind of underpowered, very small in nature. But when you look at the clinical research around, red and near-infrared light therapy, the benefits are super wide-ranging. In fact, there's thousands of published peer-reviewed studies showcasing a lot of the benefits that I'm sure we'll get into, and that's what we noticed. And so we kind of made it one of our sort of missions from day one is to really allocate a lot of resources towards education, because most people just they don't consider light a part of the overall health equation, and they're certainly not aware that red and near infrared light can be pretty powerful in terms of its therapeutic benefits. So it's just hopefully I think we can sort of help people understand or get a little bit more grasp on the power of light as the conversation unfolds here.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. So, I mean, let's maybe dive in to start with talking about near-infrared lights, and potentially like a lot of saunas will have, say, for instance, a far-infrared light instead of a near-infrared light. So let's talk about maybe what near-infrared lights are and what's the difference between your far-infrared and your near-infrared.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's good to think about it within the context of sauna or heat-based therapy, because the light spectrum is actually really broad. And just to give everyone a better example, we're talking about bright white and UV light in the 200-300 nanometer range, all the way to mid and far infrared, which are the wavelengths primarily found in a dry sauna. Those will be 15,000-20,000 nanometers. So it's actually very, very broad. And the parallel example I like to use is that is to compare light to kind of like food. So everyone's familiar with various macronutrients and how our bodies respond biologically to proteins versus carbs versus fats. But if you kind of drill into those, some fats are better than others, right? Some carbohydrates are better than others. Like as an example, we all know that eating a high glycemic carbohydrate late at night is not really a great recipe for health success. Yeah. Really for any type of success, really, unless you've got a sweet tooth, But generally speaking, that's not a great recipe for success. Well, the same kind of parallel holds true with light, that different wavelengths of light can have either positive or negative benefit on our health, especially at different times of day. And so, as like going back to the sauna sort of example, sauna or heat-based therapy can be a really, really good therapy, but it's a completely different mechanism of action, because in a dry sauna, those devices or those the saunas in and of themselves are delivering mid and far infrared wavelengths, and mid and far infrared wavelengths do a great job at producing heat. But that's a much different mechanism of action than red and near infrared light. Red and near infrared light, on the other hand, actually help our cells to produce more energy. At the sort of the core basis mechanism is for our cells to produce more ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. And because of that core mechanism, we see a wide range of benefits, everything from enhanced sexual performance through more balanced testosterone in males and progesterone production in females, to enhanced brain health through the reduction of symptoms that come from Alzheimer's and dementia, or just better reaction times, memory retention, etc., muscle recovery, pain relief, pain relief in joints, inflammation relief. Yeah, wow. The benefits are really, really wide ranging, but it's all because of that core mechanism of action at a cellular level.
So I guess on the probably something that people do really love to understand is what is like the minimum effective dose. Like, hey, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to get this thing, how much do I need to utilize it? And is there, for instance, if you're to use the near infrared compared to a far infrared, like what's the difference in minimum effective dose for using those things? Yeah,
I think it's a great question. It all comes back to to really the type of wavelength that your body's being exposed to. So as an example, red versus near infrared, visible red light versus invisible near infrared. Really the only difference in terms of mechanism of action is penetration. So red light red light is primarily absorbed in the superficial layers of our skin. That's why it's great for skin health, for increased collagen production in your skin tissues, the reduction of wrinkles and fine lines, et cetera. Really great for skin health. But because you're kind of limited from a depth of penetration perspective, near infrared light is actually quite often studied for deeper tissue benefits. Everything from bone health to faster muscle recovery to reduce joint pain and inflammation, to brain to enhance cognitive function. And that's because near infrared light has the unique ability to penetrate pretty deep within our bodies. In fact, it can penetrate through bone. But the caveat is that the energy dissipates as it travels through tissue and through bone. And so you need to be using a device that's powerful enough that will yield a clinically relevant dose of energy in a relatively short amount of time. So that kind of goes back to your question: what's the minimum effective dose? It probably depends on what you're using the device for. So with skin benefits, with a high power device, you really only need to use it for maybe 2 to 3 minutes a day. If you're looking for cognitive benefits or benefits related to bone health, or the stimulation of bone growth, as an example, you're going to need a higher powered device, and you're probably going to need to use it for a longer period of time. So with our product specifically, as an example, if someone's just interested in skin benefits, we'll typically recommend they use our products for about 3 to 5 minutes or so. But if they're looking for deeper tissue benefits, we generally recommend doubling that time, because the energy the applicable energy dose is that much higher, and which is what you need for those deeper tissue benefits.
So let's say on a skin level, someone was just to go buy themselves a red globe and put it in their regular side lamp, like table side lamp. Mm-hmm. What is that going to have any effect at all, or is it going to need to have like that much time on the skin that it's just not going to affect you, like for it to be effective? Sorry.
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that comes up quite a bit, because you can look at Amazon or any sort of local department store and pick up like a red infrared heat lamp, as an example, but it's quite a bit different. And again, kind of going back to this food example, if I served you a big plate of food and I was like, here, this has all the proteins and carbs you need, and fat, proteins, and carbs you need, you'd be like, well, I want to know a little bit more about what you're serving me. Like how much protein, right? How many carbohydrates? What type of carbohydrate is it, et cetera? And that's kind of what you need. That's the sort of approach you need to take when it comes to like just a basic red lamp, as an example. You kind of need to understand, well, what wavelengths is this really delivering? Is it delivering visible red wavelengths? Is it delivering full spectrum infrared wavelengths? Because those types of differences matter. If it take a heat lamp as an example, a basic heat lamp that you can pick up on Amazon or a local department store, the wavelengths delivered from a heat lamp are actually pretty broad. In fact, most of them fall within the mid infrared spectrum, which is why they're great at producing heat, because those are the wavelengths they're delivering. And so understanding, the exact wavelengths that are coming from the device, as well as the irradiance that's actually delivered from the device. That's sort of the energy metric that most light therapy researchers refer to. Understanding those two things, becomes pretty important, because that's sort of what you need to understand, how far are these wavelengths going to penetrate within my body, and what's the dose, what's the approximate dose or time I'm going to need to use this device in order to receive a biologically relevant result.
Yeah, I love that. That's really, really informative, and it just makes sense, right? It's like, very straightforward. That's great. I mean, something that you keep talking about is a lot of the different benefits, but something I'd love to dive into is the mental clarity, or the BDNF and infrared use in particular. So BDNF meaning brain-derived neurotropic factor, sorry. When it comes into that, what are some of the studies showing around red light? And I mean, this is something that we have talked about on previous podcasts with Dr. Anthony J when we were talking about estrogenics, but I would love to kind of dive into what you guys are finding around that.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Dr. J. He's actually done some studies with our devices at Mayo, our near-infrared devices, studying this very specific thing, the impact of near-infrared light on BDNF. But that's it. This is an interesting topic. This kind of this subject matter of brain health, whether it's dealing with patients or people that are suffering from some type of disorder like Alzheimer's, dementia, or whether just people are looking to kind of optimize their overall brain kind of or cognitive function, whether it's through enhanced reaction times or better memory retention, et cetera. And when you look at the research, most photomedicine researchers suggest that the synaptogenesis or the neurogenesis that you see in patients or people that are using near infrared light, a lot of it is because BDNF is stimulated. That's like the core mechanism that's happening, or one of the core mechanisms that's happening when you apply near infrared light to your head. And so I think we're still very early in learning a little bit more about what's going on inside our brains that's leading to these kind of wide-ranging cognitive benefits. But it appears that there's a direct correlation between near-infrared light's ability to stimulate BDNF and more particularly the synaptogenesis, or the increase in synapses that you see with consistent use of near-infrared light for your brain.
That's really interesting. So when we're talking about these different sections of the body, like we talked about skin, and obviously it's about applying the light to that part of the body. Does it matter with this side of things when it comes to the mental state and the BDNF production? Does it matter where the light is, where it's injected or where it's taken in? Does it have to be in the brain, or will you get these benefits from, say, having it on your feet or having it on your back?
Yeah, it's a great question. So typically, whatever area of your body that you're trying to treat, you want the light to directly penetrate or shine on that shine on that specific area. So as an example, if I'm just interested in cognitive benefits, I might use our little handheld device or a smaller device and just shine it directly on my forehead or on my cranium, as an example. So that's that kind of concept definitely holds true. But one of the things that we're learning more and more about is the systemic benefits that you get with full body applications. So let me give you an example. We just recently completed a small study with a group in Minneapolis, a group of kind of, I wouldn't say they're natural health practitioners, but they kind of lean towards natural health. The principal investigator was Dr. Kelly Gibbous, and she leads the group there at Bristol-Cone Medical. And they used our Joovv Solo product. That's what we refer to it as, but it's kind of our entry level product into full body light therapy. And I'm a kind of an average sized guy, so I'm about 5'10", maybe 5'11" on a good day. And this device treats from about the top of my head to just below my groin. Yeah. So I don't know, half to 2/3 of my body. So not total full body, but close to it. So that's what these people, both men and women, were using in this study. And we studied their hormone health. So testosterone production in men, and then progesterone in women. And we also looked at other hormone biomarkers to make sure that there was a balance between testosterone and estrogen, and then progesterone and estradiol in women. And what we found is that even with semi full body therapy, both the men and women saw dramatic increases in testosterone for men and then progesterone in women. And I think most dudes that are listening to this understand the benefits that come from increased testosterone production, especially if it's natural. But for women, most women, as they age, their progesterone levels decline, just like they do for guys, just like testosterone does for guys. And so women begin to rely more and more on increased DHEA levels to produce progesterone or to convert to progesterone. And anyway, long story short, we showcased that with semi full body light therapy, both men and women experienced pretty dramatic benefits when it comes to hormone production. And these were all people kind of in their middle age, maybe 45 to 55.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I say all that, and I'm kind of getting into the weeds here a little bit, but I say all that because it's becoming more and more clear that even exposing a significant area of your body, you because of the systemic irradiation of these healthy wavelengths of light, there's a lot of ancillary benefits that you wouldn't maybe normally think of. And so we're even seeing that even just targeted treatment on your brain is leading to a lot of other hormone and sleep derived benefits just from application to your brain. So I think there's more and more that we're learning about when it comes to targeted treatment versus full body treatment. But it appears that full body applications or full body irradiation with these red and near infrared light wavelengths leads to some pretty profound systemic benefits throughout the rest of your body.
So, I mean, there's a few ways I want to take this, but I mean, something good to point out is obviously you don't have to be doing handstands in the sauna if you want to be getting extra testosterone, really, is what you're saying. You don't have to be getting your balls close to the light, although you probably would get better effects from it. But when it comes to... go on, yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I was just going to say, I mean, that's exactly, I mean, these guys in this study that I just referenced, they weren't shining their package directly on the device. They were just standing in front of it. Now, granted, a certain portion of their testicles were irradiated with these wavelengths of light, but it's not like they were, shining the device right on their their genitals. So I mean, it's becoming pretty clear that just by full body irradiation leads to some of these more systemic hormonal benefits. And what's interesting about that is there's an early study. I think. I mean, it's super early. I think, if my memory serves me right, it was from the 1800s actually, and it's not really a study. It was just reported benefits that men if they were exposed to full spectrum sunlight with their shirt off, actually saw reported testosterone increases. And I'm pretty sure it was from the 1800s. I'd have to go look it up specifically, but again, that kind of showcases the idea that shining light, even just on your chest, full spectrum sunlight on your chest, can maybe lead to other hormonal benefits. So I think there's a lot more that we're going to continue to learn about this topic, but it's certainly compelling to say the least.
So something else I wanted to touch on there was the other side with the women and the progesterone, like increasing that in particular in the mid-age women. Essentially, we're going to start to see the benefit of delaying menopausal signs and symptoms from increasing progesterone, right?
Yeah, you got it. Whether menopause is completely delayed, or if you just see even because a lot of there was again, it was a pretty small female patient group, but they were split pretty evenly between menopausal, perimenopausal, right around menopause, and then post menopausal. Okay. And across the board, they all saw 100% of them saw pretty dramatic increases in progesterone levels. So I think even regardless of kind of if you're a female, where you're at kind of in that life cycle of menopause, whether pre, peri, or post, it appears that these healthy wavelengths of light can do a pretty good job at naturally increasing your progesterone levels, or allowing your body to produce progesterone pretty naturally.
Yeah, I love that. And so, in regards to amounts of production or increased production, what were sort of maybe some of the numbers that you were seeing people jump from in testosterone and progesterone?
Yeah, so in men, let me try to pull up some specific numbers, but at a high level, we tested both total and free testosterone, significant increases in both. In men, on average, it was anywhere from 20 to 40% over the course of 12 weeks. So pretty demonstrable increases, and then in women it was even higher. So progesterone increases of anywhere from 50 to 200% increases in women of their progesterone level.
200.
50 to 200%. Wow. Yeah. So we're talking about really, really compelling. Again, the caveat here is it was a relatively small patient group. I think we were at close to 15 men and women, but across the board, everyone saw these types of increases. So it was a small group, but the data is like really, really compelling. And it's to say the least, we're going deeper on this topic, with more bigger participant, bigger study sizes, studying more and more hormone markers to really get a feel for, to get a better feel for what type of results people can expect when they're consistently using light therapy.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, the benefits from that alone, if you were to get 20% more production of testosterone, whether it be free or total, you're going to feel a hell of a lot better just from that. And I mean,
no doubt.
12 weeks is obviously a chunk of time, but really that's a minimum amount of time in regards to what your whole lifespan is. What was the cycle you were going through with these individuals, the 15 individuals? What was their thing each day?
Yep. So they were instructed to use it daily, so once a day, which they really followed our general wellness kind of treatment guidelines. So it was once a day, and then they were using it for 10 minutes at a time. So 10 minutes a day. Every day for 12 weeks. And so, and again, compliance likely wasn't perfect, right?
Yeah,
These are self-reported usage. So there, I imagine there was, days of the week that people didn't use the therapy, but yeah, it wasn't much, to say the least, right? I mean, everyone has 10 minutes in their day to use to light. And I guess kind of harkening back to the way we started out this conversation, you can see as you learn more about some of these interesting benefits, whether it's cognitive enhancements or hormonal, hormone production, and balanced hormones, it's becoming more and more clear that light is a pretty important factor, to our overall health, and we'd be good or wise to pay more attention to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. That's absolutely insane. I mean, realistically, 10 minutes to sit in front of a light or to stand in front of a light is nothing. Like, how often do people watch a 30-minute show and all it takes is turning that light on and standing nice and close to it, really?
Right. And even if you're like, you're budget conscious and you don't want to take the next step and invest in a light therapy device, if you live in a location that gets a decent amount of sun, whether it's Australia, whether it's Southern California, where I'm at, just getting outside a little bit more often.
Yeah.
You're not, most of the time you're probably not going to be able to do like naked full body light therapy, but taking your shirt off, getting some nice exposure, even if it's only 10, 15 minutes a day, is can lead to some pretty profound benefits.
It's massive. Yeah. I mean, here in Australia in particular, like where I live in Brisbane, there's definitely a lot of health conscious people. It might be just in the locations I'm living in, because there's definitely a lot of unhealthy conscious people as well. And with that health conscious population, I definitely find that clothing seems to be getting less and less, which I think is actually really, really beneficial in regards to how much extra sunlight we are getting in when we are outdoors, which I actually think is great. Like, people complain about maybe people walking around in singlets and walking around in short shorts, but at the same time, I think it's great because we started off as such a sun cautious community here in Australia in particular, or the world in general is. But it's like that one time a day where you see people getting out and getting in sunlight, and it's almost like getting I don't know how to say it. It's like incidental light without them meaning to. All of a sudden, they're getting this big intake, which is excellent.
Right. Yeah, no, and I completely agree with, like, most of our cultures, whether it's in Australia or here in the U.S., they're very sun conscious, right? There's this misconception that the sun could cause cancer, and so you need to protect yourself at all costs. And it's like, well, there's a certain amount of truth to that, but a lot of that's rooted in the fact that we just don't get enough light, period. Most of us don't. In fact, there's a pretty well-known stat, at least here in the U.S., that Americans now spend 93% of our lives indoors. And so we don't get nearly enough natural light. And then when we do, it's like, go to the beach on a Saturday with the kids once a week, maybe once a week, twice a month, and then get burned, go in midday sun, and you just get burned. And well, it's like, well, of course, that's not a great recipe, right? Never, like, very little natural sunlight exposure. And then when you do, it's like peak sun and you're out there for 2 or 3 hours, and then you burn, you get a skin burn. Well, yeah, that's not great. But if you're spending, 10, 15, 20 minutes a day outdoors on a consistent basis, there's a lot of underappreciated benefits to just, full spectrum, getting enough full spectrum sunlight. The hard part about that is most people that are listening to this don't live in, Brisbane, or don't live in, Southern California, where you get a lot of natural sunlight. They're in climates like I was in previously in Minnesota, where it's like, it's dark for 7-8 months of the year and cold, and it's hard to get enough natural sunlight. So, similar to what you do with any type of, supplement, whether it's a vitamin D supplement or a multivitamin, investing in a light therapy device, is a good next step to sort of supplementing, your light diet, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, obviously we were talking about the cognitive functioning before, but also just in regards to seeing people and populations that get out in the sunlight and how much happier they are compared to those that don't. Mm-hmm. There's a big difference. There's a monster difference in just how much the sun, or just how much full spectrum light can really uplift an individual. Have you guys kind of done studies around stress or I guess depression in regards to what these Joovv lights have been able to do to people?
We've done it. We've done a little bit, but it's nothing like the hormone study I referenced previously. Yeah. There's a practitioner. There's a PhD. He's both a clinician and a researcher at UCLA here in Southern California. That's largely treats patients with some sort of depressive disorders, whether they suffer from something semi-mild like SAD or seasonal affective disorder to clinically symptomatic, depression. He's experimented quite a bit with our devices and using red and near-infrared light. In fact, we actually just posted an article on this very topic recently where he's quoted in it. And in conjunction with a lot of the more mainstream modalities that he uses as a practitioner, when exposing his patients to red and near-infrared light therapy, he saw dramatic results. And again, it was, he wasn't using red and near-infrared light alone, but in conjunction with some of these other modalities, he just saw dramatic, much more dramatic and faster results with his patients. So this is a topic that we're super interested in exploring in more detail. In fact, that article that I referenced on our site that speaks to the benefits of using red and near-infrared light for seasonal depression, it's received a ton of interest, and it may be just because the time of year. We're recording this in early November, and the days, at least here in America, they start to get a lot shorter, less and less sunlight, especially if you're in a more northern climate. And so I think people are just that much more exposed to, they're much more cognizant of the fact that, wow, the sun's gone, and I feel different, and I'm a little bit more, I don't feel as great. And so I think that really, really speaks to the power of sun, both from a therapeutic standpoint, but also just from an emotional standpoint, and the increase in serotonin and, cortisol production at the right time of day anyway, that could be had from just, more natural light exposure.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's I think you can just see it. Like I was saying before, you can just see it based on, and exactly what you just said, from winter to summer, how much happier people are. Or like, I hate to bang on them, but English compared to, say, the Australians, like, they're just a mopey country compared to, not all of them, but in general, that's probably I'm putting my foot in my mouth here, but it's like, it's almost like the persona that they put off, because they're in a miserable environment almost because of the lack of sunlight, how much difference it makes when they do get away from that environment, or when they're having incredibly good weather. I was over in Manchester last year, and it was so sunny and so good, and everyone was out, and there was the comment that everyone was making on the sun and how good it was, and oh my God, we haven't had days like this for ages. And it was generally, although weather is a very typical talking point, it was typically a great thing. It wasn't a bad thing at all.
Yeah, no doubt. In fact, we recently spent some time in New York a few weeks ago, and granted, New York's a fun city to visit, but this time of year, and kind of late fall, it's like gray skies, cold and gray skies and almost no sun, and it's like, we then flew back to Southern California. It's like a breath of fresh air, so to speak. Kind of literally, but really more so pertaining to the significant amount of sunlight that you get, and what that means kind of for your overall emotion. So completely understand where you're coming from. And in fact, maybe the title to this podcast should be, something like, if you're in the UK, why mopey English folks need to listen to this podcast. You know what I mean?
Definitely. So something that you've got on the website is around fat loss and light, and something that we talked to Dr. Jack Cruz about previously, and this kind of is separate subjects almost, but he talks about not having to monitor necessarily your carbohydrate intake based on the amount of time that you're spending in the sunlight. And if you get more sun time, that your use for carbs increases and you can utilize them a lot more beneficially than if you were to not use the sun at all. So if you're someone who typically is inside a lot and not getting much light, that you should be on a low carbohydrate diet. Compared to someone who is able to get out in the sun, they can also get a lot more carbs in, is his theory around it. And he's got a lot of studies on that, and he kind of dives deep into it. But something you guys have is based around fat loss and the Joovv Lights. So I'd love to kind of know a little bit more insight to that as to what have you guys seen around the use of the Joovv Light and how it works for fat loss.
Yeah, this is an interesting topic. I think to answer that question, and again, some of this might be considered sort of hypothetical, but I think there's some interesting evidence that suggests two things really going on. One would be the increased metabolic activity because of that core mechanism of action. Your cells, basically any cell throughout your body that has a mitochondria. Most of our cells do. They are producing more energy, and so Dr. Kelly Gibbous, who I mentioned was the principal investigator in that hormone related clinical study I referenced earlier, it's her belief that you get less metabolic crowding. So in essence, at the mitochondrial or intracellular level, think of it like traffic on a highway. Yeah. When our bodies, when we're not doing intermittent fasting or we're feeding too often, our mitochondria don't know what to do with all of this sort of traffic, so to speak, right? With an overabundance of insulin to tap into, an overabundance of glycogen to tap into, et cetera. And so you get this metabolic crowding, so to speak, or less efficiency. And so I think it's becoming more and more clear that red and near infrared light exposure leads to less metabolic crowding. Because of these the red and near infrared light's ability to stimulate your mitochondria to producing more and more energy within the electron transport chain during the fourth phase of cellular respiration. So I think that's one aspect, sort of at a high level, it's just increased metabolic efficiency. And the other thing that appears to be true with some of the double-blind placebo-controlled randomized studies that showcase the benefit, the fat loss benefits or body contouring benefits that come from red light therapy is that these wavelengths of light actually appear to almost create a more porous membrane in the cells of adipose tissue. So your fat cells become more porous and they actually shrink. So they almost leach out more fluid, and so you get kind of this shrinkage effect with your fat, in your fat tissue. And so there's actually some really, really nice well-structured clinical studies that showcase that mechanism of action. But I think either way, whether it's kind of just overall metabolic efficiency or kind of more porous fat cells, it seems pretty clear that that's kind of one of those ancillary benefits that you get from red and near infrared light therapy is just less fat, which doesn't it's certainly a nice benefit for probably most people, including myself, listening in here.
Anyone. That's for sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think most people can benefit from that.
But what's interesting about that is like we hear that quite a bit with a lot of our customers. I mean, they might buy light therapy because they're primarily interested in skin health, or maybe they're an athlete and they're primarily interested in just faster muscle recovery, as an example. But after using the therapy consistently, they'll notice some of these other benefits, whether it's increased in the quality of their sleep, or better kind of libido through the increased testosterone production, or what we just mentioned. They're losing weight, at a faster clip than they were previously. And so I think really that really speaks to just the wide ranging benefits that you get from red and near infrared light therapy because of that core mechanism of action, which is basically inducing, more cellular energy, allowing your cells to function better. at the highest of levels.
And so because of that, the better cellular function, is that why we see a higher level of recovery when it comes to muscle, or is it because of the reduction in inflammation, or is it a mix of all of the above?
I think it's both, and there's, speaking of inflammation as example, it's becoming more and more clear that that's another mechanism when it comes to specifically near-infrared light. It's in fact one of the leading photomedicine or light therapy researchers. His name is Dr. Praveen Irani, and in his lab he's showcasing the ability of near-infrared light to stimulate TGF-1 beta, which is a cytokine. It's a cytokine that's responsible for a number of things related to immune function. And because of the stimulation of TGF-1 beta, we get this really nice immune response, which helps our bodies naturally, fight off inflammation or reduce inflammation. So I think there's that aspect. There's the mechanism that we touched on earlier through the ability of light therapy to stimulate metabolic increases in energy. Anyway, there's a couple of core different mechanisms that are going on, but regardless, they're all leading to some really, really profound benefits.
Yeah, it's insane. That's super cool. I mean, we've kind of done a very basic cover over of a lot of the different benefits, I guess, of using red or near infrared lights. Is there anything else that we haven't really touched on? Like, I mean, joint pain is one thing that I guess we kind of covered on just then with inflammation, but maybe let's talk about some case studies that you guys have of where it be anecdotal or actually evidence-based when it comes to people with arthritis and using something like this for their joints. Yeah,
I mean, joint pain is one. I mean, there's like some of these emerging benefit categories, things like brain health, hormonal health, et cetera, that there's been a lot of studies that have been published over the last maybe 2 to 3 years. But then there's some other kind of categorical benefits where there's just a profound amount of science and clinical evidence that supports the use of red and near infrared light therapy for some of these areas. One is skin health. Demonstrable evidence there, and then another one would be joint pain and inflammation. Tons and tons of studies that support the reduction of joint pain and inflammation, primarily from some arthritis, or whether it's osteoarthritis or some other form of arthritis. And that I think is we're learning more and more about the mechanism of action, but it's becoming pretty clear that through red and more specifically near infrared light have a unique ability to stimulate our immune function and help it transition from something called an M1 phenotype to an M2 phenotype, which is more it's more phagocytic is the technical term, but it's basically your immune system is stronger and its ability to kind of fight off toxins and other chronic types of chronic inflammation. So pretty compelling evidence that without a doubt, red and near infrared light can lead to some really, really nice benefits when it comes to reducing joint pain and inflammation.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. When it comes to your actual devices, there's quite a few different devices you guys have now created. What did you start with, and where did it kind of, I guess, in your thought as a producer of the product, like what made you think, hey, we need to go this route or that route, and what is maybe some of the different routes you've taken with it?
Yeah, and I think this probably speaks to where we saw the gaps in the market when we first before we even started JOOVV. I mean, we didn't, just like most, our story is kind of similar to a lot of startups in that there appeared to be a need, and some gaps in the market, but we didn't necessarily intend to start a company. But having said that, it was actually my wife and her sister that had purchased red light therapy packages at a local spa in Minneapolis. This was back in early 2015, and they saw really good results, primarily related to their skin health. And the only caveat is that they went consistently. They went like 4 or 5 times a week for 8 to 10 weeks, and that's just tough to do. It's not budget friendly by any stretch of the imagination. It's certainly not convenient either. So they were looking for, a device that they could use at home, ideally something that was able to treat their full body, just like they received in that spa. But most of the products at the time were really small, and quite a few of them, or the majority of them, were underpowered. So in essence, what that meant for the end user is that you're limited to treating a pretty small area of your body. Most of these handheld devices are primarily geared for skin health, and then also because they were underpowered, it meant you had to use them for a really long period of time. I mean, we're talking probably 20 minutes on the low end, upwards of 45 to 60 minutes in order to receive a clinically relevant dose of energy. And so we thought, that's interesting, because not a lot of people are going to commit that amount of time. And then to using a therapy on a daily basis. And then secondarily to that, if these wavelengths are beneficial for a targeted area, whether it's a sore knee or a sore joint, or maybe just for facial skin related benefits, like it seems that full body application would be even better, right? You'd be delivering these really healthy wavelengths of light to much broader treatment areas. And so that was kind of our core hypothesis. And that led us to actually launch our first full body device. And now this kind of lineup of full body devices is modular. And so what that means is that you can start with kind of a smaller one and then build onto it over time, and they kind of connect together like Lego blocks, so to speak.
That's awesome.
So they connect together physically and electronically. So, and that kind of fits into like our overall like thesis as a company, is that full body light therapy is ideal, but not everyone has the funds to go to fork out thousands of dollars for a big system right away. So you can start small and then kind of go bigger over time. And we're seeing a lot of people do that. They're starting out with smaller devices, getting their feet wet, really seeing a lot of benefits, and then kind of adding to their system over time. And so that's our kind of our bread and butter. We since have launched what we call the Joovv Go, which is a nice little kind of portable, convenient travel option. A lot of people use it just in other rooms of their home, but it's a targeted handheld device that's completely wireless and rechargeable. So you can, it's very, very, very easy to use while you're, watching a movie or a show at night and just kind of getting a light therapy treatment in.
So with the Joovv Go, this is the one that I have probably the most questions around. What sort of like charge rate does it take? Like how long does it take to charge, and what's your battery life on it?
Yep. To charge for the full battery life it takes about 60 minutes. It's about an hour or so. And you'll get our general treatment recommendation with the Go is the same as our larger devices, because the power is the same. Even though it's completely wireless and rechargeable, it delivers the same sort of therapeutic energy as our larger systems. But it's about a 10-minute treatment, and you'll get off one charge, you'll get anywhere from 7 to 8 treatments. Yep. Off of one charge before you have to charge it again. So it's got a pretty nice battery life.
And so what would be, apart from the side effects of the time, I guess, do you get people who start with a Joovv Go who just do, say, 7 treatments on themselves overnight, and then they recharge it and go again for the next day? Like obviously they're trying to get the multiple benefits from using it in different locations in their body, compared to say using one large device. Is that something that happens quite a lot? Like you said, people just wetting their feet?
Yeah, that's a little bit of an extreme example in the sense that most of our customers don't. If they're purchasing the Joovv Go, it's typically for a more targeted kind of option. Yeah. It's pretty varied though. I mean, a lot of people will purchase it just to shine on their face for skin benefits. Others will use it for cognitive function. Like my wife is a great example. She'll use our near infrared version just in bed at night and just shine it right on her forehead, for 7 to 8 minutes at night, and get a nice clinically relevant dose of energy just before bed. In fact, Dr. Michael Hamlin, who's arguably one of the most profound light therapy researchers in the world, one of your English mates, right, that doesn't get enough sun over there in the UK. That's one of his favorite ways to use light therapy is shine a near infrared device right on his forehead at night. So most of our customers that purchase the Go is usually for targeted treatments like that. But a lot of them see such great health results that they'll that's kind of their. I guess it allows you to get kind of your feet wet with a more entry level price point. But then if you like the therapy and enjoy the benefits, you can kind of step into a more, one of the full body modular devices at a later point.
And you guys have the red versus the near infrared in the Joovv Go. Say, for instance, someone was looking for all the benefits. They're best to go for the near infrared over the red.
That's what I mean. If you want more bang for your buck, I would tend to go with the near infrared option. That's the only downside to our Joovv Go product is it's either or. It's not both. So you have to kind of choose the all red or choose the all near infrared. With our larger modular devices, you get both wavelengths, and you have the option of turning both of them on at the same time or flipping back and forth. But yeah, if you're just limited to like the Joovv Go as an example, that would be you're probably going to get more bang for your buck with the near infrared version, just because it's going to be able to treat a greater variety of tissue types.
Yeah, that's incredible. All right, well, Scotty, I think that's a really good kind of insight and overview of what the product is, and I think what the benefits the listeners can expect to get from it. Is there anything that you'd like to touch on before we do wrap things up? Is there anything more that you'd like to add to the conversation that you feel that we haven't touched on that we should have?
Yeah, the only thing that I'd like to probably wrap up the conversation with is just like if you're new to this aspect of light and it fitting into kind of the overall health equation or being a part of the health equation, just like food is and just like training or fitness is and getting enough sleep, all important aspects. And if you're new to this topic, I would say you don't necessarily have to like go out and buy a light therapy device. Just be more, the easy and free step is just be more cognizant of your light exposure in general, your natural light exposure, and try to get more of that sunlight. That would be, it's totally free. So it's as one of the physicians that we like to work with, his name is Dr. Ara Sapaya, trains a lot of the pros on the PGA and ATP tours. He calls it free medicine. And I think that's a great description. It's like, natural sunlight is free medicine. And so just be more cognizant of that. And then if you're in an area or you have a lifestyle that just doesn't allow you to get enough natural light, then maybe you should consider a light therapy device, just like you would a multivitamin. So that's probably the way I'd like to kind of sum it up for, the listeners is, step one is just be more cognizant of it. And then step two is if you just can't get enough natural light, then maybe take a look at a light therapy device.
That's great. That's awesome. Like, I mean, you pretty much just talked a lot of people out of potentially buying your product because you're saying, hey, just get outside. But you know what? There's an overwhelming amount of people just need that. What is it? It's like the instant gratification from doing something. And so using a light like this is perfect. And like you said, obviously there is a host of benefits that you get from using the light when it's in that close proximity and using it for, say, 10 minutes a day. But it's great that as a product, I guess, developer, that you've just gone and said that as well, because it means that it makes me trust in your product a lot more as well, I guess I'm trying to say, because you're trying to say, hey, like, you don't have to buy this, get outside and do it. But also, if you don't need it, like if you don't have the light, then use this instead. Or if you don't have the ability to get outside as often, then use this as well. I think that's great. Yeah,
and I 100% believe that. Like, this shouldn't be a displacement to natural sunlight in the least bit. It's just like I'm the perfect example. We're headquartered here in Southern California. Get a lot of really nice natural sunlight throughout the year, fortunately. But I've got kids. We're busy. It's just sometimes it's easier to go stand in front of a full body device for 10 minutes. You know what I mean? So. Yeah. So yeah, it just kind of all depends on your lifestyle, but don't underappreciate the free medicine, as Dr. Ara likes to say. So if you're budget conscious or don't want to mess around with light therapy device, definitely consider the sunlight as your as your go-to option.
Let's maybe just to wrap with, because a lot of our people that we do have as listeners, a lot of them are athletes, and so something I'd love to kind of touch into is maybe some of the athlete studies that you guys have done, or more so the athletes that you guys are working with, and some of the benefits that they're maybe seeing from the devices. And when are they using them? What's their schedule? Is it like, hey, just before game time, go and use it, or is it just a regular schedule every day?
Yeah, well, this concept of like recovery is really, really picking up steam in the kind of the professional sports ranks, at least here in the U.S. And we're likely not able to announce anything as of right now, but there's a pretty big sports franchise actually there in Australia that will likely be doing some clinical study related work that will be pretty fun to to collaborate with in the future. But there's no doubt. I mean, it's really picking up steam, and more kind of leading edge trainers, sports physicians or leading edge trainers are realizing that light is exactly what we just talked about. It's part of the overall health equation, and so many people just underappreciate it. And so athletes that are kind of on that cutting edge, and we've got a lot of them that are pretty well known athletes that are using our full body devices. They're experiencing all the same benefits that we just mentioned. But one of the ones that stands out the most or is most distinct is enhanced sleep quality across the board. I think for any competitive person, especially an athlete, they find it hard to shift into, go from a sympathetic to a parasympathetic state, to relax, to shut your body off, shut your mind off and relax. And red and near infrared light therapy have that ability to shift your, help that transition become a lot more easy, that transition, that shift from a sympathetic to a parasympathetic state. And there's plenty of published clinical evidence that actually suggest that as well. And the enhanced sleep quality that you get from consistent red and near infrared light exposure. So that's probably the biggest thing that stands out when I think about a lot of the professional athletes that are using our devices now is they're using it primarily for enhanced recovery. They're paying a lot more attention to that, and one of the major benefits that they're seeing is just better overall sleep.
Does that differ for overall sleep based on when they use the device, or is it's gonna happen no matter what?
So that's a super interesting topic, and it's something that comes up It's something that comes up when people are really starting to think about how to best use this type of therapy in their daily routine. And what I mean by that is a lot of people that are thinking about using red and near infrared light for enhanced sleep, they're thinking if I use it in the morning, am I just going to feel sleepy then because of the increased melatonin production? And interesting enough, our bodies are incredibly smart, right? So even if we're allowing our bodies to produce more melatonin in the morning, as long as our circadian rhythm isn't disrupted by too much blue light exposure, as an example, at night, our bodies they're smart, and they will release that melatonin at the right time of day, leading to better sleep quality. So it doesn't really matter whether you use it in the morning, during midday, or the evening. You'll likely reap the same types of results. The only caveat that I say is that if you're kind of into ancestral health and kind of understand how our bodies have adapted over time, it probably makes and again, this is theoretical, but it probably makes the most sense to use red and near infrared light therapy in the morning or the evening, primarily because it mimics the natural sunrise and sunset. Yeah. And red and near infrared wavelengths of light are most prevalent in full spectrum sunlight in the morning and in the evening, or in the sunrise and in the sunset. So it probably makes more sense to kind of match your circadian kind of rhythm with the morning sunrise and the evening sunset. But again, that's kind of hypothetical. And our general advice is, if you're using this type of therapy, just try to use it consistently, regardless of the time of day. But if you really want to optimize, probably do it in the morning or the evening.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. That's awesome. Well, Scott, I think that's a great place to wrap, man. That's been so insightful, and obviously you are very passionate about light therapy and what you guys have as a device and what you've been able to provide the world with, which is incredible. So, I mean, where can people follow along? Where can people get the product? And is there I guess, social platforms that they can follow along with as well?
Yeah, I mean, on social, where our handle is at JOOVV Social on most of the channels. We're probably most active on Instagram, but we're, if you hit us up on Facebook or Twitter, we'll likely see you over there. But it's at JOOVV Social, and then if you want to hit up our website, it's joovv.com. So J, 2 O's, 2 V's. That's short for rejuvenate, but joovv.com. And once you're on our site, there's probably two areas that I direct you to. If you want to go deep on the science, if you're kind of a geek like myself, go to the Learn area, or the Learn section of our site. There's a ton of long form, well sourced educational articles that that provide a lot more information on some of these benefit areas that we talked about. But if you want to kind of stay high level, check out the reviews section. It's we publish all reviews, regardless of whether they're good or not, to that page on our site. And it's just really interesting. you in their own words, you can kind of read what people are saying about this type of therapy and how it's, the most of the time it's the benefits that they're seeing, from consistent use. So that's a pretty cool area as well.
No, that's awesome, man. Very open and honest, which I love.
Yeah, no doubt. It's the only way to go.
Yeah, well, cool, man. That's been really great, and I think super insightful. Listeners, I think there's a lot of extra platforms that you can go to look at, but using the Learn section is really important for getting any extra insight into the studies that Scott has been talking about. I would also reference back to some of the previous podcasts that we talked about during this. So Dr. Anthony J, as well as Dr. Jack Cruz, we talked about. So they're both also really good insights to what light and infrared lights can do for you as well. So that's great places to start. So Scotty, thank you very much for joining us, mate. I really appreciate it.
No, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Really enjoyed the conversation. I always appreciate the opportunity.
Likewise, man.
Visit thechieflife.com for all of your nutrition coaching needs, your own personalized meal plan, as well as how you can get involved with one of our 7 pillar retreats.